What scientists have observed during a recent in-depth study of space completely contradicts all known physical models. For decades, we expected to encounter nothing but the usual chaos of natural cosmic processes. Young and old stars should emit perfectly understandable rhythms and completely random bursts of radiation. Our vast universe has always seemed to us to be an absolutely predictable and mathematically precise system. Astrophysicists were unwaveringly confident in the immutability of the laws of nature across any vast distances. But the latest data has left experienced researchers frozen in sheer horror before their flickering monitors. The equipment at the world's best observatories simultaneously recorded something truly unimaginable. The instruments revealed a picture that simply could not physically exist in our familiar reality. All the thick academic textbooks on astronomy instantly turned into a collection of outdated myths. The researchers ran a full diagnostic check on all the incredibly complex ground-based equipment several times in a row. No one in their right mind wanted to believe their own eyes or the dry readings of impartial computers. However, the frightening numbers on the screens stubbornly refused to change or vanish without a trace. Those first long seconds of incredible observations forever changed our familiar understanding of the universe. Radio telescopes suddenly picked up a perfectly clear series of powerful pulses from a very distant and incredibly dark sector. Previously, this vast region of space had been considered completely empty and of no interest to science. There are neither large star clusters nor massive clouds of glowing interstellar gas there. And yet it was from there that an anomalous signal of unprecedented power and startling purity came. The source of this mysterious radiation was located right where there should be nothing but cold emptiness. These strange and highly rhythmic bursts of energy bear no resemblance to the activity of pulsars or supernova explosions. They possess an unnaturally regular and complex structure that cannot be explained by natural phenomena. Paradoxically, the signal loses none of its original power even after traveling millions of light years. It passes through dense dust nebulae without the slightest distortion or time delay. Each new wave of this radiation behaves contrary to all the physics we know on Earth. They completely and unconditionally violate the basic laws of wave propagation in the cosmic vacuum. For decades, astrophysicists have compiled precise catalogs of all possible stellar anomalies. Our science was justifiably proud of its ability to logically explain any natural luminescence. We naively thought we had fully mastered the language of our infinite universe. Scientists were unwaveringly confident in the immutability of the established fundamental laws of the cosmos. However, this new phenomenon turned out to be far beyond even the boldest predictions. It instantly rendered hundreds of written dissertations and recognized academic works obsolete. Each new generation of telescopes only confirmed our established theoretical models. We had grown accustomed to neatly organizing everything into a well-ordered system of knowledge. The unexplored blank spots on detailed star maps grew fewer with each passing year. It seemed that space had finally lost its terrifying mystical mystery for humanity. But it turned out that we were merely glancing smugly at the very surface of a dark ocean. In its depths lurked monstrous things we hadn't even suspected. This region of space had always been considered completely calm and utterly unremarkable. There are no active supermassive black holes or dense gas clouds of dust there. Nothing foreshadowed the appearance of such a powerful and inexplicable stream of energy from the void. Usually, astronomy students simply skipped this boring sector during lab sessions. It is precisely this sector's glaring and complete normality that makes the new discovery so frightening. We expected a shock from anywhere but this sleepy and utterly quiet backwater. Under normal conditions, any natural cosmic signal has a distinct periodicity of attenuation. Radio waves from dying stars always obey strict mathematical formulas of signal degradation. Nature never creates mathematically perfect geometric patterns in their pure form. Natural bursts are always accompanied by a huge amount of chaotic radiation noise. But this new data looks like a cruel and vicious mockery of our theories. This signal is incredibly clean and, paradoxically, devoid of even the slightest natural impurities. For a very long time, we hoped to find conditions there suitable for the emergence of new life. Scientists often wonder about the possibility of life in such quiet and peaceful star systems. Biologists and astronomers have jointly searched there for the so-called habitable zone for future colonies. But now, with undisguised horror, we realize that reality may be far harsher and more hostile. Something monumental is definitely happening there, completely precluding any safety or planetary stability. This promising sector has suddenly turned into a vast and deadly exclusion zone. At first, the observatory's engineers quite logically suspected a simple malfunction in the expensive Earth-based equipment. They spent days performing a full calibration of the massive antennas and rebooting the super-powerful computing clusters. Technicians methodically and nervously checked every cable and every cooling sensor on the dishes. No one in their right mind wanted to believe the readings from their own ultra-precise optical instruments. People clung desperately to the hope of a routine software or hardware glitch until the very end. But repeated and more thorough scans only harshly confirmed the presence of this eerie cosmic anomaly. Computer algorithms struggled for a long time to filter out these strange spikes as ordinary background noise. The telescope's entire security system was operating at the absolute limit of its basic technical capabilities. The optical recognition programs were spitting out one critical error after another, literally every minute. Artificial intelligence was never able to find a single close match in the vast databases. Neural networks simply froze, unable to classify the incoming anomalous stream of information. The machines gave up in the face of this phenomenon much faster than the perplexed humans. This was the first truly powerful blow to our vastly inflated human ego. We suddenly and painfully realized that our science views the world through a narrow keyhole. The familiar picture of a completely safe and understandable cosmos had developed its first and very deep crack. Pride in our incredible technical achievements instantly gave way to a feeling of complete helplessness. We came face to face with a phenomenon that had no intention of playing by our rules. The rules of the game changed the very second we received that ill-fated first data packet. Gradually, scientists around the world realized the incredible depth of the scientific catastrophe looming over us. The mysterious signals stubbornly continued to arrive with a frightening and utterly unnatural mathematical precision. They did not repeat at all like the usual natural pulsations of distant, cold, dead stars. In their internal, rigorous structure, one could clearly discern some kind of very complex architecture that was completely indecipherable to us. It was like reading an incredibly thick book written in an imaginary alien language. We saw incredibly clear symbols, but could not piece them together into meaningful earthly words. If you look at the light of an ordinary quasar, you see only the blind fury of wild nature. It is simply a colossal and utterly senseless outburst of seething stellar energy in all directions. But the new data looked as if someone had very carefully sliced space into equal pieces. The radiation cut off too abruptly and was incredibly clean for a typical giant astronomical object. Between the massive, powerful pulses came absolute and mathematically perfect dead silence. Wild nature is simply physically incapable of turning entire stars on and off so quickly and smoothly. We on Earth have always been confident that we understand the complex language of cosmic radiation and light very well. Researchers can easily and unerringly determine the chemical composition of any star simply by its spectrum. But here, careful spectral analysis yielded absolutely impossible and paradoxical monitoring results. The physical properties of these strange, heavy waves completely contradicted the basic laws of energy conservation. Sensitive sensors detected the presence of elements that simply cannot exist in our periodic table. Physics turned into incomprehensible magic right before the eyes of the stunned and bewildered researchers. This monumental anomaly behaved as if it were reacting instantly to our very act of cautious observation. As soon as the telescopes shifted their operating range even slightly, the signal characteristics changed instantly as well. It seemed to adapt to our imperfect earthly instruments with incredible and frightening speed. This cannot be logically explained by any natural mechanisms known to Earth science. Deep space was throwing down a direct and very bold challenge to us, and we had absolutely no idea how to respond. A persistent and eerie feeling arose that someone was playing a cruel and very cold psychological game with us. Many perplexed scientists began to seriously recall old fantastical theories about ancient and powerful civilizations. Ordinary people had always secretly and very sincerely hoped to one day intercept a message from benevolent brothers in reason. But there was absolutely no logic or mathematical harmony in these intermittent and incredibly cold pulses. They resembled, rather, fragments of very old and glitchy program code from a gigantic broken system. No one out there was trying to convey valuable knowledge to us or greet the young race in a friendly manner. It looked like a colossal, cyclopean machine idling with an absolutely unknown purpose. A perfectly natural and very frightening question arose: was it even physically possible to survive there? If these incredible energy surges were artificial in nature, then their mysterious creators possessed monstrous power. Ordinary, fragile organic life would simply burn up instantly in such an incredibly powerful stream of radiation. It looks mesmerizingly beautiful on our computer screens, but in the real physical world, it is pure hell. Any rocky planet in that sector would be sterilized down to its very bedrock. No form of life known to us is capable of withstanding such immense destructive forces. No earthly organism would survive there for even a fraction of a second. The density of the raging energy at the source must exceed all conceivable limits of solid matter's strength many times over. We shudder as we look at these smooth graphs and feel the primal chill of the cosmic abyss with our whole bodies. Something grandiose and utterly merciless to all living and non-living things is happening there right now. The harsh laws of survival in that place are radically different from our cozy earthly experience. Biological evolution there must have followed the path of creating incredible monsters out of pure energy. With each passing day, a massive array of inexplicable digital data continued to grow rapidly and uncontrollably. Desperate scientists worked around the clock, trying to find even a single tiny clue to formulate a new working hypothesis. They hastily pooled the computing power of various research institutes around the world to urgently decipher these strange patterns. Servers overheated and failed en masse under the excessive load and the massive flow of incoming numbers. But the captured signal remained utterly silent, cold, and completely indifferent to our pitiful human attempts. Our young civilization, in desperation, was banging its head against an impenetrable and completely invisible wall. We all suddenly found ourselves in the humiliating role of foolish ants, desperately trying to understand the complex workings of a smartphone. Our young human brains simply lack the physical capacity to grasp phenomena of such colossal scale. The familiar and seemingly reliable laws of physics instantly turned into a useless set of outdated symbols on a school blackboard. This ominous uncertainty began to slowly but surely poison the working atmosphere in the best scientific laboratories. Researchers were losing sleep and their appetites en masse, trying to solve this utterly insurmountable and terrifying puzzle. Deep despair became a constant companion to every modern, self-respecting astrophysicist. Before, the deep night sky invariably evoked only bright dreams of distant interstellar voyages. Now, every new, prolonged glance through the eyepiece of a powerful telescope was accompanied by a clinging and utterly inexplicable fear. We finally realized clearly that for decades, we had been cruelly mistaken in our naive assessment of the safety of the vast universe. We had been living in a cozy little house made of thin cardboard, right on the edge of a raging and deadly volcano. And the worst part of this terrifying and unbelievable story was yet to come. Our awakening from this long and sweet scientific slumber turned out to be incredibly painful and brutal. Soon, the alarming situation spread far beyond the confines of a single isolated Earth-based observatory. Alarming confidential reports began arriving in perfect synchrony from completely different corners of our globe. Independent giant radio telescopes in other countries recorded exactly the same inexplicable activity. The problem suddenly and very abruptly took on a truly global and systemic nature for the entire scientific community. It became absolutely clear that burying one's head in the sand and blaming it all on an instrument malfunction was no longer an option. The scientific community had to face the harsh truth head-on, without any sugarcoating. At first, the frightened scientists sincerely hoped for a massive failure in the overall system of orbital communication satellites. They forcibly shut down some civilian equipment to reliably isolate possible sources of powerful terrestrial radio interference. However, these strange alien patterns continued to emerge with incredible clarity, even through the most rigorous hardware filtering. This powerful signal mercilessly ignored all our pathetic attempts to artificially shield ourselves from it with protective screens. It penetrated any barriers with the ease of a sharp knife cutting through thin paper. Earthly interference had absolutely nothing to do with it. The source was located in the deep, cold cosmos. The anomalous data arrived with such terrifying intensity that it instantly overloaded entire server farms. With growing horror, researchers watched as the radiation anomaly rapidly filled absolutely all available radio frequencies. It seemed to be deliberately and very quickly adapting to our desperate attempts to ignore or forcibly jam it. This predatory behavior went far beyond any blind natural phenomenon in the cold vacuum. Nature simply cannot change its fundamental characteristics so rapidly in response to passive observation. We were clearly dealing with something incredibly complex, volatile, and perhaps even hostile. We had always naively considered radio astronomy to be the most precise and reliable of all existing natural sciences. It was firmly grounded in ironclad mathematical proofs and time-tested physical formulas. Now, however, these unshakable foundations were crumbling right before our eyes in real time. The jagged graphs we observed resembled the dying heartbeat of a terminally ill patient more than the smooth, natural radiation of the stars. The cosmos was writhing in agony, and we simply stood by, recording these convulsions on paper with horror. All our previous knowledge of a calm and eternal universe crumbled to dust. The internal structure of the received signal remained incredibly chaotic, yet frighteningly organized. It lacked entirely the familiar stable cycles that astronomers love to search for in neutron pulsars. Instead, we constantly saw jagged, starkly asymmetrical blocks of data with no clear beginning or logical end. It was very much like someone's failed attempt to transmit a corrupted digital file of utterly incredible astronomical proportions, as if a colossal transmitter had broken down in the middle of operation and was now simply spamming the airwaves with information garbage. If this is indeed someone's meaningful message, then we are catastrophically unable to read it correctly. Perhaps it was sent by incredible beings whose subjective perception of time is radically different from our human one. For them, many millions of years might be equal to a single one of our brief and very fleeting thoughts. In such a dire situation, our telescopes capture only the most pitiful fragments of a single, infinitely long and complex word. We try to hear a symphony, catching only fractions of a second of random sound once every millennium. It is physically and intellectually impossible for us to comprehend the meaning of such a message. This bitter hypothesis made eminent scientists feel like utterly insignificant and helpless specks of cosmic dust. Our much-vaunted earthly technological superiority turned out to be nothing more than a very amusing and naive illusion on the scale of the vast cosmos. We took immense pride in our timid flights to the moon, while some unknown entity effortlessly tore the very fabric of the universe to shreds. The universe made it crystal clear and very harshly drove home to us that we are far from being the most important and intelligent beings here. The crown of creation swiftly fell from humanity, exposing our extreme vulnerability and primitiveness. Every new desperate attempt at deep analysis brought only fresh doses of black despair and bitter disappointment. The finest minds of humanity wrestled with the mystery for days on end, completely sacrificing their sleep and personal lives. But this global anomaly stubbornly remained a cold and utterly impenetrable fortress of information to our very limited intellect. We stared desperately into the dark abyss, while the abyss indifferently transmitted incomprehensible and deeply unsettling digital noise to us. This noise was slowly driving even the strongest and most level-headed specialists in research centers mad. Many renowned astrophysicists began to speak quite openly about the deepest crisis in all of modern fundamental physics. Those good old, thick academic textbooks could now be safely thrown into the trash bin as utterly useless. We urgently needed a completely new, as yet unknown physics to describe this terrifying, paradoxical phenomenon. But understanding and creating it could take long and arduous centuries of persistent, exhausting intellectual labor. And we might not have any time left at all for calm and unhurried research. A quiet and clinging panic began to gradually seep out from behind the tightly closed and guarded doors of cutting-edge scientific laboratories. It became painfully and terrifyingly clear that we were dealing with an unknown force of an absolutely unprecedented scale. This mighty force did not obey our physical laws at all, and clearly had no intention of engaging in a constructive dialogue with us. And it was much closer to our home planet than any of us would have sincerely liked to believe at the time. The sense of an impending and inevitable global catastrophe hung in the air like a heavy, suffocating smog. The most terrifying and shocking discovery awaited the exhausted researchers as they attempted to pinpoint the source of these strange signals. We had long been accustomed to thinking that any serious cosmic anomalies were usually firmly tied to specific massive objects or dense nebulae. But this strange, fragmented pattern had absolutely no clear physical location in the vastness of space. It began to appear unexpectedly in completely different, utterly unrelated distant sectors of the night sky. It was as if the announcer's voice were not coming from a radio, but sounding from everywhere at once. High-precision telescopes reliably detected these powerful disturbances at immense intergalactic distances from one another. Today, a strange and frightening pulse came from a very old red dwarf in the familiar constellation of Orion. And tomorrow, an absolutely identical fragment of the signal was clearly detected at the diametrically opposite edge of our galaxy. It looked so eerie as if an unknown digital disease were rapidly and mercilessly afflicting the entire body of the vast universe. The outbreaks flared up chaotically, obeying no visible logic or known laws of wave propagation. Scientists desperately attempted to map the spread of this incredible and terrifying cosmic epidemic. They meticulously plotted on a three-dimensional stellar globe every point where the equipment had ever detected these distorted signals. The resulting picture caused many renowned researchers to seriously question their own psychological stability. Huge anomalous zones formed an incredibly precise, mathematically perfect geometric grid directly around our galactic arm. We found ourselves at the very center of a grandiose and utterly incomprehensible structure, woven from pure radiation. This was definitely not some random statistical distribution of natural phenomena or the traces of distant massive supernova explosions. Perfect and precise symmetry is always the primary and absolutely indisputable sign of powerful artificial intervention from outside. Someone or something incredibly powerful was methodically and purposefully covering the vast cosmos with an invisible and deadly radioactive web. And the final scale of this gigantic energy structure simply could not be comprehended by the limited human mind. We lacked the imagination to comprehend the very possibility of such monstrous and immense mechanisms existing. The scale of what was unfolding before our eyes completely ruled out the activity of absolutely any form of simple biological life known to us. Not a single, even the most advanced organic civilization, could synchronize the operation of its transmitters over such monstrous distances. The fundamental limitation of the speed of light makes the creation of such a unified communication network a physically impossible feat for material beings. This means we have come face to face with incredible technologies capable of easily and effortlessly circumventing Einstein's basic limitations. They play with time and space as easily as we play with children's blocks on the carpet. This terrifying discovery instantly and mercilessly shattered all our comforting illusions of complete isolation and reliable safety. If the fundamental barrier of the speed of light has truly been breached, then the empty interstellar spaces no longer protect us from threats at all. An unknown and extremely powerful threat can easily traverse millions of light years in just a few Earth seconds. Our fragile and defenseless planet lies right at the very center of this rapidly expanding and destructive cosmic storm. There is no longer any refuge. The invisible walls of our fortress have crumbled under the onslaught of alien physics. We have always sincerely hoped that the pitch-black void of space is our most reliable, sturdy, and impenetrable shield. Before, the vast and insurmountable distances seemed to us the best barrier against absolutely any aggressive stellar neighbors. Now, this saving and boundless ocean of distance has suddenly and terrifyingly shrunk to the size of a tiny backyard puddle. We have unexpectedly found ourselves right in the palm of mighty forces, whose true nature we cannot even begin to comprehend. We are defenseless and completely exposed in the face of a phenomenon that effortlessly alters the very fabric of reality. Every new nightly scan of the sky consistently yielded only fresh evidence of this total, global contamination of the ether. Strange, jagged, and irregular signals began to drown out even the familiar background noise from the formation of young, hot stars. They behaved incredibly aggressively, like an invasive parasitic species rapidly displacing the local, weak flora and fauna. Conventional classical radio astronomy became practically impossible due to these incredibly powerful and chaotic energy interferences. Our once keen electronic eyes and sensitive ears were finally blinded and deafened by this monstrous roar of the void. Some of the most radical experts have cautiously suggested that what we are observing is not merely signals, but the physical disintegration of reality itself. Perhaps the delicate fabric of space-time itself simply can no longer withstand some colossal load hidden from us. These powerful intermittent signals may well be the terrifying crack of the fundamental fabric of the universe around us, tearing right at the seams. Such a theory sounded completely insane and terrifying, but at least it offered a somewhat logical explanation for all the facts observed by astronomers. If the matrix is breaking down, then the first signs are always precisely these kinds of unpredictable and massive systemic errors in the code. In any case, our good old, familiar, and cozy universe will never again be the same or safe. We suddenly found ourselves in the unenviable role of doomed passengers on a sinking ship who have just noticed a huge hole with horror. Icy water is already rapidly filling the lower holds, and we are still foolishly and fiercely arguing about the root causes of this disaster. The situation was rapidly, harshly, and completely irrevocably slipping from the tenuous control of all of Earth's academic science. All that remained for us was to wait with bated breath for the inevitable denouement of this grand and terrifying cosmic drama. In desperate attempts to find answers, we focused all our attention on the most promising star systems. Astronomers have always searched with great enthusiasm for rocky planets in the so-called ideal habitable golden zone. These are narrow regions around young stars where, in theory, liquid water can exist for long periods, and a very mild climate prevails. At this optimal distance, a planet neither freezes into an icy block nor turns into a scorching desert. It is there that, for decades, we expected to find the first signs of familiar biological life, or to detect faint artificial radio signals. Scientists were firmly convinced that water would inevitably become the cradle for new extraterrestrial intelligent life. We were absolutely and unwaveringly certain that these cozy, distant worlds held immense hope. Viewers of science programs very often ask the logical question of whether it would ever be possible to live there at all. Modern, powerful optical telescopes showed us stunningly beautiful blue and green spheres through their giant lenses. They looked incredibly alluring against the backdrop of black emptiness and seemed to promise humanity new homes for future colonization. People took great pleasure in fantasizing about building new, bright cities under alien, warm suns. These exoplanets seem to us like a true salvation from Earth's overpopulation and impending ecological disasters. But when we carefully overlaid the new map of mysterious signals onto the locations of these planets, a real shock occurred. It suddenly turned out that all this anomalous, frightening activity was concentrated most densely precisely around the worlds most suitable for Earth-like life. Strange, powerful, and jagged information pulses literally enveloped these promising exoplanets in an absolutely impenetrable, dense cocoon. The beautiful green worlds unexpectedly turned out to be the primary sources of the harshest and most incomprehensible radio emissions in our entire galaxy. The anomaly seemed to be deliberately selecting the most desirable pieces of stellar real estate for its destructive work. For some reason, ideal planetary conditions acted as a powerful magnet for this deadly cosmic radiation. This terrifying discovery dealt the strongest and cruelest blow to all our old romantic cosmic dreams. What looked from afar through the lenses like a peaceful garden of paradise turned out, up close, to be a veritable seething radioactive hell. It is absolutely impossible to live there under any possible future or present technological conditions of Earthlings. Any complex biological organism would inevitably burn up there faster than its nervous system could register the pain. The surface of these planets is bombarded every second by heavy particles of unknown origin and colossal destructive power. Dreams of resettlement have shattered against the harsh wall of this new and incomprehensible radiative reality. Many people still ask why it is categorically impossible to live there and develop new colonies to save our species. The answer lies in the fact that the level of wild electromagnetic chaos surrounding these planets instantly destroys the very molecular structure of matter. The complex Earth-based spiral of the genome would simply disintegrate into basic chemical elements in an instant under the influence of such incredibly powerful anomalies. These once beautiful worlds were completely and mercilessly sterilized by an unknown gigantic force. And this terrifying force is actively using them right now as powerful relays for its utterly incomprehensible purposes. All the water there has long since boiled away, and the atmospheres have been blown away by the raging winds of radiation storms. This grand cosmic cataclysm looks stunningly beautiful in the meticulously processed color computer images from the latest orbital telescopes. Huge, pulsating, glowing arcs of pure energy encircle the dead planets, creating majestic, luminous crowns above them. This incredible light show can easily mesmerize any unprepared observer with its scale and brightness. But behind this hypnotic visual beauty lies only the cold and absolute death of absolutely all life. Deep space has once again very cruelly proven to us its extremely merciless and incredibly deceptive primal nature. Behind the beautiful mask lies a ruthless executioner who knows neither pity nor compassion for weakness. We were all profoundly and tragically mistaken in considering these warm planets to be safe, quiet havens for the future mass migration of humanity. Now they resemble far more giant, cunning traps for those naive travelers seeking salvation among the distant stars. A mouse runs toward the scent of free cheese, completely oblivious to the deadly mechanism of the mousetrap around it. Perhaps, a very long time ago, life there truly flourished in the most familiar earthly biological sense. The inhabitants there could have built large cities just as we do, and gazed hopefully at the starry night sky. But then this strange, all-consuming anomaly arrived and cruelly changed the rules of the game for the entire region forever. Soon, leading scientists realized, with undisguised, chilling horror, one very simple and terrifying fact. The coveted golden zone of planetary habitability may well turn out to be the primary target of an information attack. If someone or something incredibly powerful is deliberately using these planets as nodes in their network, we are practically doomed. These invisible engineers unerringly select precisely those star systems that possess stable gravity and an excellent thermal balance. Our native Earth fits absolutely perfectly and flawlessly under all these strict parameters of the infected alien worlds. We possess all the necessary characteristics to become the next bright, glowing point in their gigantic network. We are incredibly fortunate that our solar system is still relatively far removed from the main centers of this raging activity. This temporary buffer has allowed us at least to notice the looming threat and attempt to make sense of it. But the invisible boundary of this wild, anomalous activity is slowly and inexorably shifting toward our own luminous sun. We are watching in real time through telescopes as neighboring star systems, one after another, are swallowed up without a trace by this powerful, senseless radio noise. It is strikingly similar to the wall of a massive forest fire that is slowly but surely creeping toward our wooden house. The fire has already destroyed our neighbors' homes, and now we can smell the acrid smoke right at our doorstep. We suddenly and acutely realize that our tiny, cozy planet is also a perfect potential target for this looming unknown. Our entire incredibly complex Earth biosphere now hangs by the thinnest spider's thread of mere random astronomical luck and immense good fortune. That thread could snap at any moment without any prior warning from space. If this strange and deadly process reaches us, humanity will simply vanish instantly without a trace. Our great cities will turn to radioactive dust faster than we can sound the alarm over global communication channels. And we won't even be able to desperately cry out for help into the airwaves, which are completely jammed by powerful foreign interference. In a desperate attempt to salvage what little remained of their former scientific pride, the world's leading theoretical physicists frantically rushed to rewrite the fundamental equations of the universe. In huge research centers, round-the-clock frantic work began to create a completely new and revolutionary picture of the world. Scientists sincerely hoped that introducing dozens of new unknown variables would help explain this terrifying madness in some logical way, using the strict language of mathematics. Gigantic industrial supercomputers ran non-stop for weeks on end, calculating the most complex virtual models of multidimensional spaces and dark matter hidden from our eyes. The machines overheated from the excessive load as they tried to find even a tiny grain of truth in this sea of chaos. But the resulting numbers stubbornly and relentlessly refused to coalesce into any meaningful and fully consistent overall picture of physical reality. The most fundamental theoretical problem lay in the absolute and phenomenal unpredictability of these new and truly terrifying cosmic radio signals. Any normal, natural physical process in our universe always inexorably strives toward a final equilibrium, increasing entropy, and complete energetic rest. Sooner or later, any hot gas cools down, and any storm turns into absolute and dead calm. This strange anomaly, however, behaved in a completely and directly opposite manner, constantly and aggressively increasing its internal informational complexity. This contradicted the most basic law of thermodynamics, which humanity had discovered as early as the dawn of the Industrial Age. It seemed to feed voraciously on our naive scientific attempts to measure and somehow classify its completely incomprehensible and alien physical structure. Ultrasensitive orbital sensors regularly recorded completely spontaneous, powerful bursts of energy emanating directly from points in the absolute and utterly empty vacuum of space. At these coordinates, there was simply nothing physically capable of emitting even the slightest heat or a faint radio signal. This directly and very grossly violated the first and most fundamental, unshakable law of classical thermodynamics regarding the strict conservation of basic energy. Complex structured matter did not simply magically appear literally out of absolute nowhere right before the eyes of the stunned physicists. It was born immediately in the form of incredibly complex and highly organized data packets of enormous density. In terms of absurdity, this was absolutely equivalent to seeing with one's own eyes how cold water spontaneously boils violently in a refrigerator freezer. We came face to face with a previously unseen aggressive phenomenon that literally and with a crunch breaks the local laws of our familiar and mundane earthly reality. In those affected sectors of space, where the overall density of incomprehensible signals rapidly reached a certain critical and maximum mass, the basic gravitational fields began to distort rapidly. The powerful gravitational pull of the stars began to work in jerks, tearing apart the orbits of the dead exoplanets revolving around them. A direct beam of light from distant background stars warped wildly and fragmented chaotically, as if it were struggling to pass through a huge, shattered glass lens. The very fabric of space-time in these anomalous regions became incredibly unstable, highly fluid, and an extremely dangerous place for any material object. Familiar geometry ceased to function there, and straight lines twisted into impossible knots. Any Earth research vessel, even the most modern and well-protected one, that accidentally entered such a turbulent zone would be instantly and mercilessly destroyed by powerful unknown forces. All of its onboard computers and ultra-precise navigation instruments would go haywire from the abundance of utterly paradoxical and contradictory input data from external sensors. The strongest interatomic bonds in the spacecraft's sturdy metal hull would simply disintegrate instantly into individual basic chemical elements. You would absolutely not survive there for even a single brief second, finding yourself at the very epicenter of this monstrous and all-consuming quantum storm. Our entire material reality in these regions rapidly ceases to be a solid and predictable environment for organic life. It begins to strictly and unquestioningly obey some entirely different, utterly alien, and hostile mathematical rules. Desperate scientists in secret laboratories have begun to discuss, quite seriously and loudly, the incredible possibility that what we are observing right now is merely a pitiful projection of a much higher and more complex dimension. To understand this crazy concept, just imagine how an ordinary three-dimensional object looks to the flat inhabitants of a primitive two-dimensional paper world. These creatures would see before them only very strange, incomprehensible, and constantly changing flat cross-sections that make absolutely no logical sense to them. An ordinary apple would appear to them as a strange circle that appears out of nowhere and changes its size every second. It is precisely in this way that the enormous working tools of incomprehensible four-dimensional or even five-dimensional great entities might appear to our very limited three-dimensional perception right now. We are simply trying to describe grandiose and incomprehensible three-dimensional figures using flat, earthly language. If this frightening spatial theory is indeed the harsh truth, then we find ourselves at the very deepest and darkest bottom of a gigantic and complex cosmic food chain. We are simply absolutely physically and biologically incapable of grasping the vast and complete picture of the grand events unfolding right now throughout our entire observable universe. The most advanced and expensive Earth-based telescopes and super-powerful radars are nothing more than very primitive and laughable plastic toys in the feeble hands of completely blind children. We are desperately and blindly trying to timidly feel our way around a huge and dangerous cosmic elephant without having the slightest idea of its true, terrifying dimensions and intentions. Our civilization looks incredibly pitiful against the backdrop of these colossal spatial and energetic manipulations. We simply lack, catastrophically, both the brainpower and the senses to comprehend the full extent of this impending disaster. This heavy and utterly joyless thought very quickly robbed many experienced researchers of their very last hope for a successful solution to this complex scientific puzzle. A profound and hopeless professional depression rapidly engulfed the world's leading observatories and the largest private research institutes in a dense and very heavy gray shroud. Many renowned professors simply stopped coming to work, realizing the absolute and fatal futility of any further astronomical calculations. After all, why study the light of distant stars so persistently if the very foundations of fundamental physics turned out to be nothing more than a very local and highly temporary random rule? Absolutely all of our millennia of accumulated knowledge turned in an instant into nothing more than a pitiful, dry handful of ordinary fine river sand. And this worthless handful is now incredibly easily and simply blown away by the very first powerful gust of the cold cosmic wind of change. This massive and fatal global failure in the unshakable laws of physics made it crystal clear that our collective future is no longer stable or even remotely predictable. For centuries, we have carelessly built grandiose long-term plans for the development of civilization, naively and firmly relying on the eternal stability of Earth's orbit and the constant gentle warmth of our yellow sun. But what terrible fate awaits us tomorrow if this almighty anomaly suddenly decides to slightly alter the mass of an ordinary electron right here in our own solar system? Any slightest adjustment to such delicate and critically important fundamental settings of the universe would lead to an instant planetary catastrophe of a completely unimaginable scale. All complex biological life on our planet, without exception, could instantly and forever be extinguished in just one incredibly short and absolutely silent fraction of a second. We won't even have time to simply be frightened or try to hide in deep concrete bunkers. We suddenly found ourselves standing on the very edge of a crumbling precipice, where absolutely all the safe paths and clear signposts known to us end forever. Far ahead of us lay only a terrifying and utterly impenetrable thick darkness, in which these very strange, jagged, and cold geometric signals of death flashed ominously. Classical terrestrial physics could no longer serve as a faithful and reliable guide for us in this incredibly dark forest of looming and terrifying uncertainty. Old academic science had finally died in agony, leaving us completely defenseless in the face of this colossal and incomprehensible cosmic storm. All of modern humanity has been left completely alone with its deepest, most primal, and incredibly ancient animal fears of the dark. Space has forever ceased to be a place for bold discoveries and has turned into a vast execution chamber, patiently awaiting its hour. When deep outer space finally ceased to yield to any human logic whatsoever, we were forced to turn our frightened gaze inward. If these alien and terrifying signals permeate all interstellar space everywhere, how exactly do they affect our Earth? For decades, we have been carelessly broadcasting our own radio waves in all directions without the slightest sense of fear or caution. Our television broadcasts and military radars constantly pollute the airwaves, announcing our existence to the entire universe. Scientists decided to investigate what actually happens to our outgoing signals far beyond the solar system. And this investigation yielded results that sent shockwaves through the global scientific community. For this unprecedented experiment, data was used from humanity's most distant space probes ever created by our engineers. The good old Voyager spacecraft have long since left the cozy and protected heliosphere of our Sun and are now flying alone in the cold and utterly empty interstellar space. We deliberately sent them a series of incredibly complex test signals and waited with bated breath for the telemetric response. The results of this seemingly simple and routine technical test caused even the most seasoned and skeptical radio engineer's blood to run cold. For the first time in history, reliable Earth-based technology encountered a phenomenon that completely shattered all data transmission protocols. Signals from Earth reached the distant spacecraft in a highly distorted and unrecognizably altered technical form. They did not simply weaken naturally from traversing the vast distance, as the fundamental laws of classical terrestrial radio physics had always dictated. Instead, they were strangely interwoven with precisely those same jagged, harsh, and irregular patterns that we had previously observed with horror from distant alien stars. Our own pure terrestrial voice returned to us deeply infected by this eerie and incomprehensible cosmic anomaly. As if an invisible DJ had maliciously remixed our smooth sound, transforming it into an aggressive and meaningless digital screech. This terrifying discovery meant that the invisible boundary of this frightening unknown ran right along the very edge of our own planetary home. We are no longer merely safe, detached observers of some very distant and abstract galactic drama, peering through our telescopes from a safe distance. This strange and distorting medium has tightly and securely surrounded us on all sides and has begun to interact incredibly actively with our own communication technologies. We have unexpectedly found ourselves inside a vast, invisible, and dense ocean that instantly alters all the physical properties of any waves emanating from us. The walls of our imaginary fortress have proven permeable to this alien physics. Any peaceful message we send to potential distant brothers in reason will inevitably and brutally be distorted beyond recognition. If someone out there, in the depths of space, is listening to the night airwaves, they will ultimately receive only incredibly aggressive and hopelessly broken radio static instead of our music or mathematics. This alien environment acts as a completely deaf and very hostile translator, deliberately disrupting any meaningful and peaceful dialogue between civilizations. Our former confidence in our openness has been replaced by the realization of a total and hopeless information quarantine for all of humanity. We have simply been physically disconnected from the interstellar internet, with the main router cable cut right at the system's exit. This terrifying circumstance forces us to view the notorious Fermi paradox and the great silence of the heavens in a completely different and far darker light. We do not hear other advanced beings, not because they are entirely absent from this gigantic and ancient universe full of habitable planets. We are simply cut off from one another by this distorting and dense medium, which mercilessly transforms absolutely any intelligent voice into chaotic and terrifying static. All of us, the various intelligent species of the galaxy, are simply screaming desperately and in vain through an incredibly thick, sticky, and dirty wall of information. No cry for help or offer of friendship will ever reach its rightful recipient in this corrupted radio spectrum. But who exactly erected this monstrous wall of misunderstanding, and for what incredible perverse purpose was it done? If this is simply a new natural property of a fundamentally renewed universe, then we are simply catastrophically unlucky with the basic physics of our reality. But the artificial and overly precise nature of these distortions points directly to the constant presence of someone's directed, powerful, and incredibly cold will. We are being deliberately and harshly deprived of a voice in this infinitely vast, ancient, and truly terrifying stellar community. Higher powers have decided that it is still too early for our young species to participate in the adult galactic conversations. Perhaps we really did venture into this ancient dark forest too early and carelessly, with our bright, flashing flashlights of powerful radio signals. Our sincere and childishly naive enthusiasm as pioneers might have seemed to someone older to be a very dangerous or highly irritating factor in a long-established, peaceful system. The invisible blocking barrier may simply be an automatic safety filter that reliably protects the mature and quiet universe from our uncontrolled childish cries. We are gently, yet very persistently and ruthlessly silenced by a heavy, dense cushion of insurmountable electromagnetic interference. This is punishment for our excessive chatter and overconfidence as the crown of creation. This grim theory deals a completely fatal blow to our collective and centuries-old human dream of a great cosmic future. We have always proudly and ambitiously planned to one day conquer distant stars and spread our culture and technology to every corner of the vast galaxy. Now, however, we find ourselves forever locked within our own tiny solar cradle, without the slightest hope of an equal dialogue with other races. Our once great role in this vast cosmos has pitifully been reduced to passive participation in some strange, cruel, and terrifying grand experiment. We are no longer the architects of our own destiny. We are merely lab rats in a glass, hermetically sealed maze. We have suddenly and painfully become complete strangers in the very universe we so sincerely and lovingly wanted to explore in depth. Every new astronomical discovery today only further underscores our utter insignificance and extreme vulnerability on these gigantic cosmic scales. The former mild anxiety was quickly replaced by a very heavy, oppressive, and paralyzing sense of inevitable eternal isolation from the rest of the vast world. We find ourselves in the position of a blind man sitting in a completely dark room, listening in horror as someone enormous outside slowly scratches at the door. And the most terrifying thing is that we cannot even call for help, because no one will hear us. Despite all these frightening and unambiguous discoveries, humanity stubbornly refuses to accept its complete powerlessness in the face of this vast unknown. Governments continue to mindlessly pour billions of dollars into dubious projects aimed at sending active and powerful messages into the deep, dark cosmos. With maniacal persistence, we are building new, even more powerful and expensive laser and radio telescopes to directly transmit the most concentrated beams of information. This pitiful spectacle looks like a desperate, painful, and senseless attempt by a weak prisoner to break through the thick concrete wall of his solitary confinement cell with his head. Our pride does not allow us to simply stop and admit our complete defeat in the face of the overwhelming physical superiority of the environment. Many level-headed scientists have begun to protest quite openly and very strongly against such blatantly reckless and provocative space activity. They quite rightly and loudly point out that we have absolutely no understanding of the true nature and hidden mechanisms of this distorting barrier. Any brazen attempt on our part to pierce it with a powerful, narrowly focused beam of energy could easily provoke a retaliatory and extremely aggressive, forceful reaction from its creators. We are currently behaving like foolish children who, in complete darkness, are blindly poking a sharp stick into the lair of a gigantic creature whose actual size exceeds our wildest imaginings by millions of times. We are teasing a sleeping monster without having any escape plan whatsoever in case of its sudden and furious awakening. If these strange intermittent signals are indeed part of a massive defensive or deterrent security system, we are playing with fire in an incredibly dangerous way. Automatic combat or security protocols of absolutely any technical level always respond to direct hacking attempts as unambiguously and harshly as possible. A strong, focused, and directed pulse from our tiny Earth could very well be interpreted by algorithms as an act of direct interstellar aggression or an attempt at sabotage. In such an extremely unpleasant scenario, an instantaneous automated counterattack would reduce our planet to dust before we even have time to blink or realize our mistake. We risk provoking a global Armageddon simply because of our misplaced and childish curiosity. Just vividly imagine for a second that you are in unfamiliar territory where fierce combat operations are currently underway between high-tech armies unknown to you. The harsh logic of basic survival dictates the urgent need to immediately turn off all lights, hide securely in the deepest basement, and behave as quietly as possible. But we didn't just mindlessly turn on every light and spotlight at our disposal. We demonstratively went out onto an open roof with a huge megaphone and started shouting. Such self-assured behavior isn't just incredibly foolish from a tactical standpoint, it's absolutely suicidal for our entire young species as a whole. We are hanging a huge glowing target on our own backs in a dark forest full of predators. But blind advocates of immediate active contact continue to stubbornly and loudly insist on the vital necessity of seeking allies in this frightening and cold darkness. They naively believe that our sufficiently strong radio signal will somehow manage to break through this terrible interference and reach the ears of distant, benevolent civilizations. This almost religious and completely unsubstantiated belief in kind and wise savior aliens is based solely on old and naive Hollywood movies, not on harsh mathematical reality. Space has already shown us its sharp teeth with crystal clear and unambiguous clarity, but with astonishing stubbornness, we refuse to acknowledge this obvious and imminent mortal danger hanging over us. Our instinct for self-preservation has suffered a serious breakdown under the weight of our excessive ambitions. In their desperate attempts to drown out this colossal anomaly, engineers are thoughtlessly increasing the power of our transmitters to utterly dangerous and previously unthinkable limits. They are artificially creating such powerful bursts of radiation that they can already cause real physical harm even to our own fragile and protective ionosphere. We are prepared to tear down our own home, our only home, with our own hands from the inside out, for the sake of a vanishingly slim chance at a very distant and highly dubious interstellar dialogue. This obsession with first contact at any cost now resembles a full-blown mass psychosis that has firmly gripped virtually the entire global scientific and political elite. Reason has given way to a fanatical desire to prove our cosmic significance at any cost, even the most terrible one. Every new message sent into the void is a nervous shot in the dark, in a vast and utterly pitch-black room, filled to the brim with invisible distorted mirrors and terrifying shadows. We have absolutely no idea what exactly our compressed information will bounce off of or where it will ricochet to, nor who might accidentally intercept it in the end. Perhaps this strange, oppressive barrier was created by the ancients precisely to reliably isolate such aggressive, unpredictable, and noisy young species as ourselves. In that case, our desperate and loud cries only serve to confirm once again to the creators the absolute correctness of their original decision to place us under strict and indefinite quarantine. We ourselves prove our complete insanity and danger to the surrounding stellar community through our hysterical attempts to make contact. Observing the complex patterns of these failed attempts, cold-hearted analysts see only the rapidly increasing density of counter-anomalies and harsh interference. The louder and more piercingly we scream into the interstellar ether, the denser, fiercer, and harsher the resistance of this incomprehensible cosmic environment becomes. The barrier clearly possesses some form of advanced feedback and is perfectly capable of quickly adapting to our crudest attempts to break through or bypass it. It seems to gently, yet incredibly persistently and heavily, press us back down to the surface of our home planet, preventing us from breaking free. An invisible giant hand grabs us by the collar and plops us back into the sandbox every time we try to climb over the fence. Sooner or later, all of our overly ambitious humanity will have to bitterly accept the obvious fact that this enormous door is locked tight from the outside. And those unknown and powerful beings who installed this gigantic informational lock have absolutely no intention of letting us into their elite galactic club. Our blind and stubborn obstinacy only wastes colossal Earth resources and puts the future of absolutely all of humanity on Earth at incredible risk. It is time for all of us to stop banging our bloodied fists senselessly against a closed door and start listening very carefully to what is actually happening around us. Our salvation may lie in silence and secrecy, not in loud and dangerous cries. Perhaps the most important and true lesson of this situation lies precisely in forcing us to learn to live in absolute and submissive cosmic silence. This new, harsh universe directly demands of us the humility and prudence that we have never once demonstrated throughout our entire bloody earthly history. We must finally clearly realize our true, very modest place in this terrifyingly complex and incredibly hostile architecture. Otherwise, we run a very high risk of becoming just another mistake, erased without a trace, in someone else's grand and utterly indifferent experiment. And then, all that will remain of our once great civilization will be a brief flash of static on the radio waves, which the barrier will absorb in a fraction of a second. With each new round of these complex studies, the illusion of our safety crumbles into tiny pieces. Before, we naively feared only the fall of a giant stone asteroid onto our peaceful cities. We were frightened by the possibility of a global ecological catastrophe on Earth itself due to factory emissions. These local earthly threats were at least comprehensible to our minds and left a chance for salvation. We could build underground bunkers or develop new technologies to clean the atmosphere. Now, however, we have come face to face with a genuine and all-encompassing existential horror. This vast cosmic fear completely paralyzes any human will to actively resist. We have realized our absolute insignificance in the face of phenomena the size of entire galaxies. No bunker, no matter how deep, will save us from changes in the fundamental laws of physics around our sun. We have become completely defenseless targets in an incredibly vast and dark crosshairs. We finally realized that we have absolutely no control over even the smallest part of our stellar destiny. For many years, science instilled in us a false sense of complete mastery over the harsh nature around us. We took pride in our rockets, but they turned out to be nothing more than pathetic toys in the hands of unknown forces. At any moment, these strange, distorting patterns could simply snap shut around our solar system. Our home star could go out just as easily as a candle blown out by a random breeze. An unknown, powerful force could wipe us off the face of the universe with absolutely no effort at all. It would happen as easily as we wipe gray dust off an old table with an ordinary rag. To the vast and ancient universe, the sudden demise of all of humanity will go completely unnoticed. This event will be no more significant to the galaxy than the silent fall of a dry autumn leaf. Space will simply continue its endless rotation, forever forgetting our brief and fleeting existence. This heavy and oppressive thought is gradually and deeply penetrating the collective consciousness of ordinary people. It is no longer an exclusive secret of a narrow circle of specialists far removed from complex astrophysics. Popular global science magazines have permanently ceased publishing hopeful articles about imminent contact with extraterrestrials. No one is waiting anymore for friendly visitors in silver saucers bearing the technology of immortality. The former bright optimism has been replaced by a cold, gloomy philosophy of our total and unconditional doom. Society is rapidly sinking into the realization of the deepest isolation of our entire young biological species. Contemporary mass culture is beginning to actively and painfully reflect on our terrifying cosmic loneliness. Writers and filmmakers are creating grim depictions of a world trapped amidst hostile cosmic forces. People go to sleep with the heavy feeling that an utterly indifferent abyss is watching them. This anxiety poisons our everyday joys and makes us doubt the meaning of any long-term planning. For centuries, the future of all humanity seemed to us like a wide, bright road leading straight to distant stars. Now, however, this grand prospect looks like an utterly dead-end, dark, and incredibly bleak impasse. A logical question arises. Why should we even continue building super-fast spaceships? What is the point of flying to a place where fundamental physics beyond our solar system operates by different rules? Any of our spacecraft would simply be torn to atoms by these incomprehensible spatial anomalies. Scientists genuinely do not understand why we should continue to develop complex interstellar communication technologies. We find ourselves locked tight in a local planetary reservation with absolutely no right to early release. These heavy existential questions are slowly but surely eroding the basic motivation of all talented researchers. Even the most brilliant engineers across our vast globe are losing heart. The fire of discovery in people's eyes is rapidly fading under the weight of this harsh, universal hopelessness. Perhaps we have truly and finally reached the absolute limit of our technological development. This limit was originally imposed on us by this cruel, cold, and utterly incomprehensible reality. We have developed at an incredible pace over the past centuries, taking pride in our immense scientific achievements. But in the end, we have run headlong into the invisible glass ceiling of our informational cage. Our rapid run-up has ended with a brutal crash against the insurmountable wall of absolute cosmic silence. Absolutely any further progress of civilization requires a massive departure beyond the narrow confines of our native Earth. But this vital exit is completely and permanently blocked by strange spatial anomalies. We have, paradoxically, become the pitiful hostages of our own incredible intellectual success. Our population is growing on a small planet, whose resources we will very soon completely exhaust. We risk destroying our own home to its very foundations, with absolutely no backup options. Some of the world's leading sociologists believe that realizing this trap will lead to dire consequences. It could trigger the deepest and most destructive global crisis of all of humanity. Mass psychology works in such a way that if people have absolutely nowhere to strive for externally, they go mad. Deprived of a great goal, they begin to furiously and senselessly destroy their own world from within. The energy of space conquerors can easily turn into the wild energy of total self-destruction. The irreversible loss of the great cosmic dream instantly makes us incredibly angry and extremely cynical. Society becomes highly prone to mass self-destruction and constant bloody wars over the remnants of resources. Severe existential anxiety becomes the constant background noise of our boring daily lives. This crushing psychological pressure methodically drives entire generations of talented young people mad. They simply see no point in studying and creating in a world doomed to eternal isolation. We are now forced to look in the mirror every day and see a very weak and frightened face staring back at us. It is a face that, quite possibly, will never survive in the long-term astronomical perspective. All our animal aggression and incredible technological hubris have turned out to be utterly useless tools. They crumbled to dust in the face of this silent but utterly unyielding cosmic barrier. All our accumulated nuclear arsenals aren't worth a single penny against the laws of distorted physics. We never managed to become the great and wise rulers of a vast, shining galaxy. Instead, we turned out to be nothing more than caged lab mice in a foreign and very dangerous maze. Invisible experimenters simply closed the lid of our cage and turned off the outside light forever. This is the cruelest and most bitter disappointment our entire human civilization has ever experienced. The collapse of these illusions inflicts upon us an almost physical, unbearable pain from our own insignificance. The once sweet illusion of human invulnerability has been shattered to its very foundations, but in its smoldering place, a new, very mature understanding of our fragile nature must surely grow. We no longer consider ourselves the almighty gods of the universe or the crown of nature's creation. We are now simply abandoned orphans, desperately trying to survive in a cold, dark, and alien space. We must cast off the crown of superiority and don the humble garments of the universe's humble disciples. And the very first, most crucial step toward this survival requires immense inner strength and courage. It is an honest and open acknowledgement of our colossal weakness in the face of the majesty of the mysterious cosmos. We must stop shouting into the void and finally learn to deeply respect that grand darkness. A darkness that, right now, is watching us from the outside, completely silently, coldly, and very intently. All our years of painstaking astronomical research have led us to a single, terrifying conclusion. Billions of dollars spent and thousands of dissertations written have turned to dust in the face of the truth. We have gazed into the deepest abyss of the universe for an incredibly long time and with intense focus. People sincerely expected to see there only a beautiful reflection of our own technological greatness. We wanted to find brothers with whom we could joyfully share our great earthly achievements. But instead of the long-awaited joyful reunion, that dark abyss itself opened its invisible eyes wide. It looked straight into our very essence, into our weak and utterly defenseless human soul. And in that cold, unblinking, and utterly alien gaze, we did not find what we were looking for. We saw not a single drop of warm sympathy, pity, or even basic understanding there. Space looked at us with the icy indifference of a pathologist studying a tiny, interesting bacterium. The strange and destructive signals we found have remained the greatest mystery forever. This is the largest and most terrifying unsolved problem in the entire centuries-long history of our science. These patterns do not repeat themselves at all like natural pulsars or ordinary gas anomalies. They categorically lack any easily readable mathematical harmony pleasing to the human eye. There is no golden ratio or pi in them, which we so hope to receive from a higher intelligence. They simply exist alongside us as an incredibly harsh and stubborn fact of objective reality. It is a phenomenon that we are utterly powerless to change in any way, let alone fully understand. And it is a constant, ever-present, and deeply painful reminder of our humble place. A reminder that the universe is under no obligation whatsoever to be comprehensible to our limited brains. And it certainly has no plans to become a safe and comfortable habitat for our species. We have all unexpectedly found ourselves in a very difficult and paradoxical situation of intellectual deadlock. This is the very moment when every new scientific discovery only multiplies our collective sorrow. The thinner, more powerful, and more sensitive our modern optical instruments become with each passing year, the more terrifying, depressing, and hopeless the overall fundamental picture of the surrounding world appears. Knowledge no longer brings joy. It brings only new doses of soul-chilling existential fear. True reality turned out to be completely and radically different from what we had presumptuously imagined. At the dawn of our space age, we were blind romantics dreaming of stellar empires, but the universe turned out to be brimming with incredibly robust, invisible, and insurmountable informational barriers. We have discovered gigantic dead zones and distorting media that are utterly hostile to any spark of life. They extinguish the very attempt at the existence of open, intelligent life across vast intergalactic distances. We can sit in our safe laboratories for a very long time yet, naively comforting ourselves. Philosophers will spend hours engaging in empty speculation about our great and unique role in this strange world. We can continue to diligently devise beautiful and complex theories about matrices and digital simulations. Many like to believe in the theory of a benevolent quarantine organized by higher, benevolent cosmic intelligences. Such a belief acts as a psychological defense, helping us come to terms with our terrifying status as prisoners. But deep down, absolutely every serious astronomer understands perfectly well the true, brutal essence of things. We all realize the true, terrifying reason for this great, cold, and centuries-long cosmic silence. No one is protecting us. No one has built a cozy incubator for humanity's smooth development. We are simply completely alone in an incredibly dangerous, dark, and very cruel place. And we don't just not know the rules of the game in this place, we catastrophically and utterly fail to understand them. Our collective future is now securely and tightly hidden from us behind an impenetrable wall. It hides behind a thick veil of these jagged, utterly chaotic, and truly terrifying electromagnetic interferences. We cannot look even a few centuries ahead because we do not control the situation. Perhaps this enormous invisible wall will one day simply collapse without warning. And then we will suddenly come face to face with those unimaginable beings who once built it. or events will unfold according to a different, much slower and more dreary scenario. We will remain forever to rot in our local solar system, locked in an invisible gravitational cage. Humanity will slowly and sadly fade away as a technological species, having exhausted all its purpose. Both of these possible and highly probable scenarios evoke within us the deepest, most primal dread. They make us feel utterly helpless, small victims of colossal circumstances. But, paradoxical as it may seem, it is precisely in this soul-chilling existential dread that meaning lies. Hidden within it is the true, albeit very grim, profound beauty of our arduous path of knowledge. Despite all the horror, we have nevertheless found the courage to acknowledge our crushing defeat. We have openly declared that the universe is infinitely larger, more vicious, and more complex than our cozy domestic fantasies. We did not bury our heads in the sand like ostriches when confronted face-to-face with this terrifying anomaly. We did not turn away from the frightening and destructive truth, preserving our dignity as explorers. Scientists stubbornly continue to scan this completely broken and hissing ether, night after long night. People sit at their monitors with maniacal persistence, waiting for even the slightest change in this wall of chaos. There is something great in this almost hopeless, stubborn confrontation with endless uncertainty. Here, the strongest, most unyielding, and proudest trait of our human, rugged, earthly nature is revealed. We will continue to listen intently to this ringing, aggressive void until the end of time. We will do so, knowing full well that we will most likely never be able to decipher its messages. Humanity will continue to carefully and meticulously collect these pitiful crumbs of distorted radiation data. We hold on to the naive, yet so necessary hope of one day piecing them together into a coherent and logical puzzle. This painstaking labor has become our new global religion, uniting all the scientists of the world. It is an incredibly heavy, almost unbearable burden for any self-aware mind in the universe. A burden that compels us to try to find at least some meaning where it may not exist at all. Our brain simply refuses to accept the concept of absolute chaos and the meaninglessness of what is happening. And we will meekly and silently carry this heavy intellectual cross until the very end. We will carry it to the very end of our incredibly long, bloody, and very strange earthly history. The next time you step outside and look up at the clear, crisp night sky, remember this. Forget forever those old, beautiful, and very naive fairy tales that science fiction writers fed us. Don't look there anymore for kind, wise star friends or saviors with advanced technologies. Don't try to spot new, beautiful green planets there for the carefree resettlement of our advanced species. This illusion of an open and friendly cosmos must die in your mind right now. Look at those distant, cold, and indifferently twinkling points of faint light in a completely different way. From now on, perceive them as enormous, incredibly sturdy locks on the heavy doors of a gigantic cosmic prison. There, beyond the limits of our atmosphere, a drama of utterly unimaginable, colossal proportions is unfolding right now. This spectacle is so grand, alien, and complex that our primitive biological minds are simply incapable of comprehending it. Our nervous systems would physically burn out if we tried to grasp the full extent of this tragedy. We searched so long and so desperately for extraterrestrial signals, and in the end, we actually found them. But they brought us not the joy of a long-awaited encounter, but only the bitter realization of our own insignificance. They gave us an understanding of our total, absolute cosmic blindness and intellectual deafness. The vast universe turned out to be incredibly huge, terrifyingly complex, and completely indifferent to our pitiful ambitions. All our laughable attempts to fully understand and conquer it have crashed against a wall of icy indifference. Fundamental reality has indeed turned out to be far from as cozy as we always imagined. We thought of it too confidently and with incredible carelessness, measuring the cosmos by our narrow earthly standards. This miscalculation proved fatal to our worldview and our entire philosophical picture of the world. And the most terrifying, most paralyzing thing about this whole story is that this is only the very beginning of the journey. We have only just begun to realize with horror the true, monstrous scale of our profound cosmic problem. A vast, dark abyss continues to stare directly at us through space, utterly silent and unblinking. It reliably and permanently conceals its true, soul-chilling motives in the darkness of dense radio interference. We are left completely alone, face to face with this terrifying, unsolvable, and deadly mystery. We have not a single chance to receive a life-saving hint from outside or to ask for help from wiser, older companions. There will be no cheat sheets. We will have to take the survival exam blindly and with our hands tied. Absolutely all of our former naive illusions have been brutally shattered to their very foundations. And now all of humanity must, with great difficulty, learn to survive in this entirely new, harsh reality. The silence of the vast cosmos will never again be a source of joyful fantasies or romantic hopes for us. This ringing emptiness in the speakers now sounds like an absolutely final and very harsh verdict. A verdict without the right to appeal for our entire fragile, isolated, and so lonely world.